Here chemoreceptors are divided into two types, like peripheral chemoreceptors and central chemoreceptors. Central chemoreceptors, in the name itself you can see they're present in central nervous system. Peripheral chemoreceptors, they're present in blood vessels, etc. So first let us see the carotid body. So always remember body. Why I'm stressing the name body? Because in carotid body our chemoreceptors are present, but in carotid sinus, we are having our mechanoreceptors, our baroreceptors. So carotid body, aortic body are sensitive to mainly uh, partial pressure of oxygen, that is mainly peripheral partial pressure of oxygen, and the peripheral chemoreceptors are sensitive to the partial pressure of oxygen, and the central chemoreceptors are mainly sensitive to both partial pressure of oxygen and carbon dioxide, and also and also pH, pH. So this is very important. Chemoreceptors are sensitive to oxygen, but central chemoreceptors are sensitive to carbon dioxide and pH. So whenever there is decrease in BP, or whenever there is, here example, here mainly not BP, because chemoreceptors are mainly related to oxygen. Of course, if oxygen is decreased, blood supply, it nothing but means that blood supply is decreased, so that is nothing but even BP is decreased, so they fire and send the information through 9 and 10, again 9 and 10 glossopharyngeal nerve and also our vagus nerve to the central nervous system. So in the central nervous system there is tractus solitarius, we know, and also we have cardiac in inhibitory area with vagus in the medulla. So cardiostimulatory area leading to sympathetic outflow by sympathetic ganglion, and vasomotor area through sympathetic outflow to arteries and veins. So all this inhibit the vagal outflow and increase the sympathetic outflow, and therefore increase the BP. So actually what I am saying, if I draw, you'll understand. So for example, this is the brain. So here we have tractus solitarius, here we have cardiac stimulatory area, cardiac inhibitory area. So now as I said, this is the 9th glossopharyngeal, this is the 10th vagus, which are coming from the carotid body. So this is a carotid body. In the carotid body, whenever the oxygen is low, it gives the message to 9 and 10 that to the tractus solitarius. First it will act, this both will go and activate the tractus solitarius. This tractus solitarius will in turn activate the cardiac stimulatory area, but not inhibitory area, because we now need no need to inhibit, because already the blood pressure is low. Now we need to increase the blood pressure. So to increase the blood pressure, always remember sympathetic activity will come as outflow, and it will in turn lead to constriction of vessels and increase the blood pressure. So central chemoreceptors are present in the medulla near the fourth ventricle. We know the fourth ventricle will be somewhere here. So central chemoreceptors are mainly present in the fourth ventricle, and they are sensitive to, as we already seen, carbon dioxide and also pH. So if the carbon dioxide is high, it binds with the water, and so PCO2 plus water, it forms bicarbonate. So again this bicarbonate converted into hydrogen ion and HCO3 bicarbonate. So this H plus drives the central chemoreceptors. They stimulate the vagal and vasomotor. That is, they stimulate both the sympathetic and parasympathetic. So this is a very rare and interesting one. So till now we have seen only either vagus will activate, or either sympathetic system will activate, but here this in central chemoreceptors both the sympathetic and parasympathetic are activated. So initially because of sympathetic the blood pressure increases, and because of parasympathetic, heart rate decreases, pulse rate decreases because of parasympathetic. So this effect is mainly called as Cushing reaction. So Cushing reaction is mainly seen when both the sympathetic and parasympathetic get activated. And next we are coming to the increase in intracranial pressure. So sometimes, because intracranial pressure may increase because of CSF pressure is increased, so the cerebral circulation is decreased mainly in in CNS ischemia. CNS ischemia means whenever the blood flow to the brain decreases, then what happens? Carbon dioxide level increases and oxygen also decreases there. So it may be caused by tumor in cranial cavity. So if any tumor in cranial cavity, because of all these conditions, blood flow is decreased and intracranial pressure is increased and carbon dioxide level is increased and oxygen is decreased, so this carbon dioxide and water combine together to form again H2CO3, and this again convert into bicarbonate and H plus ion. So this H plus ion stimulate the central chemoreceptors. When they are stimulated, both the parasympathetic and sympathetic are activated. So when chemoreceptors lead to increase in vagal and sympathetic outflow, so this develops headache. Because both are activated, it's like confusion, but it lead to headache, decrease in heart rate, increase in BP, projectile vomiting, compressing the renal veins and leading to papilloedema. When the veins are compressed, their hydrostatic pressure is increased, so the fluid may spill out into interstitial space and leading to edema in papillae of our eyes, and the margins of optic disc are also blurred because of this edema. So all these conditions are seen whenever the intracranial pressure is very high, that is seen mainly in CNS ischemia. So severe hemorrhage, very large accident, then lot of blood is lost. So the blood volume, posterior pituitary, so there is very much decrease in blood volume. So the posterior pituitary mainly releases the ADH, adenosine, that is um, not adenosine, sorry, antidiuretic hormone. So posterior pituitary, this is also called as vasopressin. So from posterior pituitary mainly this is released, it is present in our hypothalamus, and this ADH is mainly synthesized in hypothalamus in supraoptic nucleus, and from the neurons it is released from the nerve endings. It acts as a V2 receptors in the last part of nephrons, that is mainly in the DCT, distal convoluted tubule collecting tubule cells, and the cells develop the water channels on the luminal membrane, on the luminal side, so that they can reabsorb more water, right? So more water is reabsorbed, and this helps in retention and maintenance of blood pressure. So whenever the ADH is increased, venous return is increased, cardiac output is increased, inverse stroke volume is increased, of course blood pressure will also sure increase. So we also have last one, atrial natriuretic peptide. So ANP is released from atrial contraction. So it is released when there is lot of increase in blood volume, and this acts on kidney and produce a natriuresis. Natriuresis means lot of sodium and water are lost in the urine. That is loss of sodium and water. In this way, water salt lost to body. So now it can stabilize the blood pressure. That is nothing but decrease the blood pressure, because lot of sodium and water are going in urine means lot of blood volume is lost. So now we can decrease the blood pressure. So we have clearly understood in two parts of this lesson. Now let us see some important things which are found in our textbook diagrams. So here you can see the two glossary terms like pressure diuresis means because of arterial pressure there is lot of loss of urine. So increase in renal output due to increase in arterial blood pressure. Same pressure natriuresis, because of more pressure lot of sodium and water are lost in urine. So increase in renal output of sodium mainly because of increase in arterial blood pressure. So these are mainly when they are seen, because whenever the blood pressure is very much high in our body, we try to follow this mechanism, that is our body tries to follow this mechanism and lose the extra water and extra sodium from urine. So renal output curve, yeah, renal function curve, let us see that. What is that? So here you can see on x-axis we have our arterial pressure, on y-axis we have our urinary volume output. So you can see as urinary volume is increasing, see first for 1 it's at 0 it's 50, at 1 it is coming to 60, at 2 it is moving further. So as you can see urinary volume is increasing, arterial pressure is also increasing. See for 8 of urinary volume the pressure is like about 180 or 190, yeah, it's like about 200. So you can see as the urinary volume is increasing, arterial pressure is increasing, they are directly proportional. Now let us check out one more graph. So on x-axis you are having the arterial pressure, and y-axis you are having the intake or output. So you can see a special point here, the equilibrium point. So whenever you can see the amount of output, this is output, right? So this is input, arterial pressure is increasing. Why it will increase? Because if you take more water and more salt intake, then it increases. And you can see how intake or output, how much output is also equal. So how much sodium and water you take, that much only it gets excreted. So that is called as equilibrium point. Always normally in our normal conditions always we maintain the equilibrium point, but whenever some disturbances occur, you can see the renal output may increase when compared with intake. In that case, when output is increased than intake, then blood pressure decreases. And sometimes what happens below this equilibrium point, sometimes output may decrease but intake may increase. This may lead to increase in blood pressure. So these are all the abnormal cases, but normally the equilibrium point is equal water intake, salt intake, and equal water output and salt output. So by this graph, by this two graph, what we can say, on a y-axis we have intake and output, same on x-axis we have arterial pressure. So by these two graphs, what we can understand is at the beginning you can see if the sodium intake and water intake is normal, means at the equilibrium point. At the same time, the output are also same. But here you can see when the output is increasing, or when the arterial pressure, you can see when the arterial pressure is increasing because of more intake of sodium and more intake of water, then even the output, even the output also tries to come to the elevated pressure by increasing. Finally it want to reach the equilibrium point, because it's in a normal condition. In normal condition always they try to do it so by means of, if lot of blood pressure is there in the body, they try to excrete more sodium and water through urine. And if it is low blood pressure in the body, then they try to retain more sodium and water. So this is a normal mechanism. So by this graphs we can say that whenever you can see the blood pressure is elevated, even this output also tries to elevate that and gets equal. So that's what this two graphs says. So here you can see renin-angiotensin vasoconstriction mechanism to control the arterial blood pressure. So whenever there is decrease in arterial blood pressure, renin is released from the kidney, and the renin substrate angiotensinogen is converted into angiotensin 1, and this is converting enzyme is present in liver, lung, because of liver releases angiotensinogen and convert into angiotensin 1. And because of converting enzyme which is present in lung, angiotensin 1 is converted into angiotensin 2. So now this angiotensin 2, because of angiotensinase, it get inactivated, or because of uh, whenever there is decrease in blood pressure, it leads to cause of vasoconstriction and also renal retention of sodium and water. So whenever it is constricted, you can understand blood pressure will increase because total peripheral resistance will increase, and also venous return will increase. So both diastolic systolic blood pressure will increase. And whenever renal retention of sodium and water, this also increases the blood pressure. So now let's try to understand this graph. You can see the effect of two angiotensin 2 levels in blood on the renal output curve, showing the regulation of arterial pressure at an equilibrium point when the angiotensin 2 level is low, and when the angiotensin level is high. So you can see angiotensin levels in the blood are normal. There is normal intake, there is normal output, but you can see this 2.5, it says that whenever there is high angiotensin 2, actually these are the experiments which we are done in dogs. This is 0 here because it is inhibited, that is angiotensin 2 converting enzyme is inhibited here. So if there is inhibition, you can say the point is 0, that is arterial pressure which is formed is 0. And because when this is not activated means it can't regulate the blood pressure, so it is 0. But here 2.5, because we have given here angiotensin 2 more, we have increased the intake of angiotensin 2 more. Because of higher intake, you can see it lead to perfect regulation, increase in blood pressure to 2.5. This led to increase in blood pressure. So by this we can say that because of this regulators, it may lead to increase in blood pressure, but if they are not present, this may lead to 0. It is inefficient without this system. So by this we can understand that the RAS system plays a very important role in regulation of long-term blood pressure. Actually this experiment is done in dogs. So now this is the final diagram we have. So whenever you take more salt, what happens to your body? It's interesting, let us understand. Increase in extracellular volume, because more salt, always salt is followed by water, right? So if you take more salt, it comes into our extracellular fluid. Also water comes there because of dragging solute drag from sodium. So because of this leads to increase in arterial pressure because more blood volume is increased, and increase in renin angiotensin because it always sends whenever there is high blood pressure. So because of this, the decrease renal retention of salt and water, because now the pressure is high already, so now it need to excrete more sodium and water in urine. So that is nothing but it is leading to pressure diuresis, means pressure diuresis. Because of arterial pressure, more water is losing, and pressure natriuresis means because of arterial pressure, more salt is going out in the urine. So in this case we can see both pressure diuresis and also pressure natriuresis. So return of extracellular volume is almost to normal, because now all urine is went out. So as now all urine went out, only the blood pressure is maintained well. So return of arterial pressure almost to normal. So this is a proper mechanism. So by this we completed the long term regulation of blood pressure.